This session is close to my heart. About 5 years ago, I met through Geraldine Dreyfus, our FiReFilms ambassador, a woman named Dr. Katia Moritz. And Geraldine said, Sharon, you need to know Katia. She's working with children, she's a doctor, but she's a first-time filmmaker, and her film is critical. So I said, Katia, how can you stop this practice where you're so successful and make a film for the first time? What's inspiring you about this? And she said, and she's beautiful, as you can see, she's behind me. And she said, I'm really sick. I'm very, very sick. I have an undiagnosed disease. I've been misdiagnosed for years. And this is a critical global issue. We need to get this out to the world. I need to make the film. So we brought Katia to FiRe. And she, on the panel of our FiReFilms panel, she talked about the film that she was making called Undiagnosed Medical Refugees. And in the meantime, I met Doug Jamison at the New York dinner. And I talked to Doug about undiagnosed diseases because everybody at FiRe knew somebody that was undiagnosed. At the New York dinner, Doug said, I'm working on that. I'm passionate about that. This matters to me. So Doug flew out, Katia came over, and they met for the first time with the film crew in our living room in Park City. And that's how the story began.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to have a really amazing panel, I think. We're going to start off with Katia, who's going to update us a little bit on the film.
Do you guys want to watch the clip first?
Yes.
And then, so we'll watch a small, tiny clip, and we are focusing on one patient only today, because some of you have seen the trailer and other parts of the film. So we're going to focus on Alex, who currently is 11 years old, so you're going to see footage of him about a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. And then I'll talk about the movie after you see it.
So we were in here for 10 days for the G-tube surgery, went home, and then exactly a week after, he had one seizure, and then he had another seizure 4 hours later, and it was hard to wake up. We called the paramedics, they came, and he had a grand mal seizure. They said he had 3 more in the ambulance. There's all sorts of complications, of course, with surgery, but because we don't know what Alex has, it was even more of an uncertainty, so kind of a risk on top of more risk.
Yeah, no, this right here is in a good wave. So we need it when it's those little, you know.
My little boy called me Ma. Learned to spell his name by singing it in a song and say the silliest things that make me laugh. In a year's time, I watched his speech slur, sentences become shorter, and hard to hear his words. He could recite the Pledge of Allegiance, call out his best friend's name, and shout for joy opening presents. But now he communicates by grunts and hums. What's happened to him? What is the source of ongoing progression, and when will it stop? Tonight, Alex cried for half an hour before falling asleep. And then I sat down and cried myself, mourning losing my sons little by little every day, and I can do nothing to help him.
So Alex is still undiagnosed, and I'm here to talk to you about the film, and sorry for showing such a sad clip, but this is the reality of families without a diagnosis. So this family is the most wonderful, hardworking, dad works, graveyard shift, takes care of him, the mom takes care of him. I mean, it's the most amazing thing to watch, and they're still smiling, they're still taking him out. Alex goes to school when he can. When he can't, the teachers come to him. He's been in hospice care, in and out of hospice care, but because he's undiagnosed, there's no prognosis for him, and so they don't know what to do. So he goes into hospice care, and then comes out and goes back, and it's a very difficult life for this family. But the movie was exactly where you are and seeing here where Caroline is, because we didn't know what to do either. So here we spend many months, many years, a few years already, filming these people and their lives and, my own life, trying to tell the story of desperate people without a diagnosis, people on the cutting edge of medicine, the people that could bring us the new discoveries, the new diseases, right? And no one really was paying attention to us. And that's where we were in the movie. And so what happens next was I reached out to the principal investigator of the Undiagnosed Disease Network, Dr. Isaac Kohani, and to interview him for the movie. And he actually decided that he wanted to help us. And we launched the Clarity Undiagnosed Challenge. So for me, making the movie, I'm not a filmmaker. I wasn't a filmmaker. I am now. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a cognitive behavioral psychologist. And I was just like, I don't want to tell the sad stories. We need to do something. And we had 26 teams from all over the world try to virtually diagnose the patients in the movie. And we created a different platform that interests people. So Google asked us for our files to learn how to summarize complex medical data. And it was an amazing exercise in medicine, but unfortunately, we are the true undiagnosed patients, and nobody could actually find the diagnosis. I mean, we had some ideas, but no diagnosis. And as we continue to film the families, and Doug will tell you what happens next, we needed to continue to find ways to bring collaboration. In my mind, the movie was always about, new technologies plus collaborations equals hope. That's the only hope for the community that I'm part of. And it's not like a few people, we're not outliers. If you think in your life, you probably know someone who's been undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, right? And if you don't, unfortunately, you're going to start paying attention now, and you're going to see that there are millions and millions of people. And this is in the US. So if you think about it, it takes many, 7.5 years for a person to get a diagnosis of a rare disease in the United States. Imagine in other countries where they don't have the available resources that we do. So I was a little desperate, to be honest. I needed to find what to do next because we end up empty-handed. And for the movie, you can't tell a story that doesn't have an end at all. So our movie reflected exactly the life of the undiagnosed, and it still does, because we can't tell the story because we all didn't know and still don't know what we have. And so I think that's kind of where I'm at, and I wanted to pass it on for Doug to tell.
Yeah, and I am really just a supporter from the side, but I have had my eyes really opened by Katia and my own experiences, as some of you have heard. But there are tens of millions, at least, of people just in the United States that are in this condition. And I think to a large extent it's because we are still trying to do diagnosis from symptoms rather than from data and from systems, as Mark Anderson has been talking about, analysis. And so, Doug, I want you to talk about the amazing thing you were able to do to help Katia go to the next level. Yeah,
so those of you here last year was the first year of the UnDx consortium, also the first year, I believe, the UnDx initiative here at FiRe. And this was really born and bred at FiRe. So the inspiration from my end, at least, came from watching the CTO challenges up here and the idea of, hey, I can go to a conference and let's find a problem, and can we do anything to tackle it instead of all leaving and coming back next year and learning something new. And so I met in 2015 FiRe, I met Katia. I saw the film there. She talked about the work with Isaac Kohani. They just finished the Clarity project so that all these patients in the cohort had been full genome sequenced. And prior to, in April of this year, founding and forming HALE.life, I spent 17 years as an early stage venture investor. So I was investing in, at that point in time, all the contextual information that comes in beside genomics. And the question that Katia and I started talking about is, can we bring in some of that contextual information and get that data, and will that give us a better understanding of what's happening in a system to these patients? So 2016, sitting on this stage, we actually presented the data. 5 companies, I know one of them, I saw Chris Tompkins from Chromatid is here today. So we presented that information here. It was great new information. I think Andy will touch on some of the different forms of information and data we collected. And we presented that to the patients. And I remember Larry sitting here, we were at the breakout session, he said, okay, that's great, it was all siloed. So we have all this new siloed information, but if we want to look at a system level, we have to integrate it. And I said, great, year 2 project, that sounds great. Larry, can't you do this? And Larry said, I think there's only 3 or 4 people that really have the capabilities to integrate this type of complex biological information and start looking at it like that. And that led us on our search to Andy Kogelnick and Open Medicine Institute as one of these rare individuals that has the skill sets to understand that. So I will pass it on to Andy to talk a little bit about himself and what we're doing.
Thanks, Doug. So I'm a physician, but I'm also a computer scientist. And so I lead sort of a tortured existence. And when I met Larry, that was sort of a breath of fresh air for me because here was a computer scientist of significant stature who was actually interested in diving into medicine at that level. And so I was at Stanford for about 8 years, sort of trying to run after a molecular view, a systems view, a functional view of what was going on in patients that we were seeing. And even a progressive place like Stanford, I was running into all these roadblocks and silos around how the medical system was functioning. So about 6 years ago, we decided to break that out into the Open Medicine Institute, which is really an effort to go and collect data from any source, whether it's the patient, whether it's their genomics, their proteomics, their any kind of omics, any data from anywhere, their physician, EMR data, and bring it together in one place and really use that to drive questions about that patient, make diagnoses for those undiagnosed patients out there, and then turn around ultimately and apply that into their care. And so this whole data approach in medicine is actually a really new thing in terms of bringing good and large-scale data into sort of a systems biology view. And we wanted to do that not only across allopathic medicine, but across any modality of medicine, and that's when we turned to physicians like Dr. Mike Kurisu. I'll turn it over.
Yes, I'm happy to be here. Larry warned me this is going to be a different type of conference. We're used to kind of medical conferences, and this is much more collaborative, so thanks for having us. So I'm an osteopathic physician, and it's a DO, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what that is. Because most people come up to me and are like, you're a DO, can I get a prescription for some eyeglasses? And I'm like, well, no, but I'm going to start a workup. I will start the workup for your dyslexia. So there's osteopathic physicians and allopathic physicians, DOs and MDs. And they're both 2 parallel pathways in medicine, in healthcare in the United States right now. We go to the same medical school training, residency training, can specialize in everything. There's 2 main differences between DOs and MDs. The first one is we get about 1,000 extra hours of neuromusculoskeletal anatomy, hands-on diagnosis and treatment. So that's what I do every day with every patient. I put my hands on their body and feel on how the skeletal and muscular structure is changing from the disease process, from whatever disease that it might be. And there are techniques to help fix all of that. So we know all the different types of techniques that the chiropractors, physical therapists, massage therapists, but we're applying that in a medical model. The main difference between DOs and MDs is a philosophical difference. So the 3 pillars of osteopathic medicine is the body as a unit, structure and function are interrelated, and the body as self-healing. So that creates this more holistic systems approach to medicine. So MD, allopathic medicine, is really good at looking at a disease. Osteopathic medicine looks at the holistic picture of health. And the way that translates for language that you guys all might understand is the body as a unit, so that's multi-component, nonlinear. Structure and function are interrelated, it's dynamic, and the body is self-healing, adaptive systems. So that's how I approach health, it's a multi-component, nonlinear, dynamic, adaptive system. So if someone coming to me with a symptom of heartburn or shoulder pain or whatever it is, I don't just view that as one single entity of symptoms. There's something going on in the entire system. So using the systems approach is a very good thing to come to some diagnoses. And I think we're doing a really good job. We heard like an excellent talk by Lee Hood about systems biology and using proteomics, metabolomics, microbiome, genomic sequencing, and we're really pushing the envelope of what medicine is. But I'm also here to give you a gentle reminder that that's not the only envelope. So there's other envelopes out there. And what I mean by that is there's other healthcare systems that have been around a lot longer than conventional medicine. So who here has had an acupuncture treatment before? Right?
Wow.
So acupuncture is a subset of something called traditional Chinese medicine. And everyone knows what yoga is. That's a subset of something called Ayurvedic medicine. So these healthcare systems we're starting to integrate that, and that's what I do at the university. I'm the director for the Center for Integrative Medicine. And on my team, we have acupuncturists, yoga therapists, nutritionists, psychologists, osteopaths, and we put all of those into the primary care departments to get a more robust view. And these healthcare systems some people in the medical community are like, why do you want to study acupuncture? We got drugs and surgery to fix this. But, if we look at the wisdom of longevity, right, because acupuncture has been around thousands of years, and Ayurvedic medicine's been around thousands of years. And I think there's a wisdom of that longevity. They've been doing, clinical trials on themselves for thousands of years. It's still working to this day. And I'm really excited, and when I met Larry, I was like, how can we integrate all of these different healthcare systems? How can we take the data from all of these things? No one's really looking at that in the field of medicine. And I think we have the tools and technology to do that now, to integrate all of these healthcare systems to get a more robust, complete, holistic view of the individual. So one of the patients that I've been working with that is undiagnosed is sitting next to me here. And, it's kind of great to meet her and watch her and guide her through this journey. And this is Dr. DeAunne Denmark.
I want to echo Mike in thanking everyone and having me here. This is truly one of the most amazing conferences I've attended, to have this breadth and diversity of experience. It really excites me to have this cross-pollination. So I am a trained MD PhD. I did my training at Oregon Health and Science University. I finished in 2011, and frankly, was not only burned out, but kind of angry about the education that I received. I don't know what it is. I'm sure all of you can relate to this. Something innately maybe in us that thinks in systems. I was never formally trained that way, but really frustrated at medical education early on. I was sitting through PowerPoint lectures for 4 hours, and I went through a really good, in fact, internationally known for its not only medical education, but emphasis on primary care. So excellent quality education, and yet was still sitting through PowerPoint lectures that I could have done all of myself. The capabilities that we have to really engage medical students especially is not there, much less thinking in systems. Everything that you heard Dr. Mike just say is nowhere to be found in my education as an allopathic physician. If we were just, those 3 tenets from the very beginning could profoundly change the way we all think about and learn medicine from the very first day, but it wasn't there. So I continued to get frustrated, and when I graduated, fortunately, I did my PhD training, and I felt like that gave me more freedom, and I could really pursue a lot of different things than I was being exposed to. My PhD training was actually in systems approaches to complex neuropsychiatric disease. We were using all sorts of technologies, including genomics, but really high-level data set generation. And I knew that was really where medicine was going. Precision medicine was not a word at the time even. So, but all the techniques we were using and the ways that we were thinking about disease were very systems-based and really what precision as medicine is being described as today. So I took a break when I finished. I went traveling for about 5 months internationally, and it was there that I got profoundly sick. And I came back virtually bedridden for a while. I was actually out of work for several years, and became my, I think, equivalent, in fact, probably the best education I have ever gotten in all of this as a patient. I call it my patient postdoc. Because I was really on an odyssey to try to understand what was going on with me, and so disheartened and frustrated and terrified, actually, that I had more access to technology as a graduate student than I did as a patient to try to understand what was happening. I would come with reams of papers and ways of thinking about things that only to be met with blank stares at some very profound high-level institutions across the country. So I cannot overemphasize this level of abandonment, and Katia's film just speaks about it so eloquently. It's enough to have a disease or some sort of illness that has radically changed your life, but when you don't have a name for it and you don't have a partner in your journey to help understand or help you feel better, at least even if you have a horrible diagnosis, people can be on the same page with you in some way because you have something to fit that under. But we're just sort of free floating when you don't have a diagnosis. I still don't know what to say. So it was 2013 that I saw Larry's wonderful TED Med talk, if you hadn't seen this, and truly I was in tears because here was this very, well-respected, high-profile person showing in full color, in full data glory, what we could do in medicine and how we could look at things on a molecular level. And it just, radically changed my life. I was very fortunate to get connected with him, but now I also could be part of a community around people who got it. And I think that's one of the key things here and where we're really trying to move this forward. I, as a physician scientist, had nowhere to go to get medical care. None of these doctors could help me. I have pursued almost every, it feels like, alternative modality, because many of these practitioners are very interested in helping you. They're not trying to fit you in a category. They just want to help you feel better. And so there are many, many ways things that I've explored, including osteopathic medicine, yoga, acupuncture, everything. But there was only one place that I knew about in the whole world that I could actually talk to a doctor who could use these technologies and modalities to try to help me in this case. And so that was the Open Medicine Institute, and I became a patient there last year, but now I'm on staff as well to try to implement these technologies for patients across the board.
So yeah, DeAunne's a great example of the new generation of physicians that kind of get this sort of thinking, and she's really living it because she's undiagnosed, and so this has a special meaning for her, and it's transformative in a way.
So, my life has really been changed by interacting with these people. Through Katia, I really had my eyes open to how medicine is about a bell curve. And if you only have symptoms, then if you're in the middle of the bell curve where that symptom actually corresponds to something that there has been therapy for that works on, then medicine can help you. But the wings of this bell curve are huge in terms of the number of people, and they don't fit that model of medicine. And so what are you going to do about it? Well, they've basically been just left adrift, as Katia and DeAunne has said. So with all this new capability coming in that Lee Hood so eloquently talked about in the opening evening, of saying, well, let's do a different point. Let's just actually figure out what the state of your system and its time rate of change is. Go back to Newton. And then from that derive as Mark keeps eloquently talking about, this interactive set of systems that you are. And try to understand how those systems have gotten out of phase with each other. Then from that, you're treating the individual, but within a data-rich context, these dense data clouds that Lee talked about. And so when I met Andy and we started collaborating between Cal IT2 and the Open Medicine Institute, I actually had a doctor I could work with who was doing all of this omics and integrating it. And literally, there are hardly any people who can do that. I mean, even at UC San Diego, where we have wonderful researchers, I'm not sure we have Andy's equivalent. And then with Mike, I had never heard of osteopathic medicine until a few years ago. And as we'll talk later in another panel, his laying hands on me, the idea that doctors would actually spend the entire session with their hands on your body. How many people have that experience in the MD world? It changes everything. And we'll talk about that later. And then Doug, working with Illumina, Metabolome, these are the the Qualcomms, the Intels of their subsector, and the fact that they were willing to come together, inspired by Katia, and volunteer to test these patients, and get that data. So we have what Lee would call these dense data clouds for each of Katia's patients. I was blown away that kind of generosity would come out of corporations. And so there's something really fundamental going on here. And without FiRe, and I just want to tip my hat to both Mark and Sharon, I'm not sure that this integration of people and ideas would have happened. And I think it's something very special that's going on here that I go to conferences all year long. I don't see that sort of thing happen anywhere else.
So Larry, can I touch on, so just maybe just spend 3 minutes talking about what we're going to do in year 2. And
Please.
I'll just preface that for a second. So just to bring this around, as we talked about, Katia, through the film, through Isaac Kohani, through Illumina, and the Clarity Project, had got full genome sequencing for the cohort of patients that are in the
And
film.
their families as well.
And their families. We then, last year in year 1, those of you that were here, we got metabolomic information, we got epigenetic information. Chromatid, who's actually here today, did chromosomal rearrangement technology. Rob Knight and UCSD team through American Gut Project did microbiome data as well. And there was another group, a regenerative medicine group, that sort of gathered a lot of that data. So that was our data set. Last year, reported in the silos. Maybe, Andy, will you just take a second and talk about the project proposal for this year and the working for that as well?
So what we're doing essentially is taking the data field, the types of data that Doug was just talking about, mixing them together with the clinical data, pulling all of that information into one space so that we can now start to really apply some cutting edge AI, TBD type of data analytics to those data sets and start to sift through those, because there's millions of data points in each of those sets, and sift through those and find sort of the unusual things, right? If we look at those kinds of data with Bayesian analysis, you don't find much. And so it takes sort of a different eye towards looking at these to find the weaker outliers, but they might be the most important ones in the systems biology view. So we're going to try and take a deeper dive on looking at these as functioning systems and all of these measurements within those systems as this first phase, and then hopefully moving on to what do we do about that for each of these patients in the second phase.
Right, because our patients are very heterogeneous, right? Because we don't have the same undiagnosed illness. We all have different conditions, and it's hard to find the common ground here. How do we look at all of us? But one of the things that I think it's exemplified by the effort here is that we are creating a new system, a new community, and our little movie that started as like, oh, we need to tell these people that something is happening, actually was the catalyst to bring people together to pay attention to this issue. But not only that, it benefits science enormously, because the patients that we are presenting to the scientists and to the people that are interrogating your data, a fantastic cohort of patients that you can't find them anywhere. And they have data that no one else has. So if you look at our patients, the data points that we have from all different areas, different ohms and different concepts and different doctors, it's something that is so rich. The problem is that we are on the cutting edge of technology and medicine, where, you know, even when you have a finding that you think there's something there, to look at, you don't even know how to look at it. And so that's the way science will progress, right? You have to have an unanswered question to be able to search for an answer. And so I think that what's so beautiful about the FiRe community is that, you know, they kind of adopted the film here, and it actually, it goes now both ways, where I think we all have benefited from that connection. And I think that, you know, moving forward, the goal is that the answers that we find, not only in terms of diagnostics, but the process that we are creating. How do we analyze this data? How do we clean the data? How do we, going backwards even more, how do we establish the questions? What questions do we ask people when they come in and say, I'm undiagnosed? And how do we even establish a criteria for who is undiagnosed? Is that you've been sick for a year without a diagnosis? You've seen 10 specialists? We don't even have a criteria for that, right? And so it's all spread apart without any database or any way to kind of, curate the information so we can actually look at it. And that's our goal now, is to really bring together this information and create a new process, so the person that is sick does not have to go through what myself DeAunne and others are going through. And our goal now is to get together as a team and clinically be able to look at that. But also, we're here in front of you because you guys are the technology people, and we need help. We need the help of the entire community. And actually to bring this together, it takes a village, right? And here's building the village.
So, yeah,
I just want to add that bringing these data sets together, it really does become much more of a computational computer science problem that we haven't experienced in medicine, and we haven't traditionally known how to do it. But there's a lot of hope in that, and we've already applied that to other patients where we see 14 standard deviations off of normal in metrics that we haven't measured in traditional clinical settings. And that's really powerful, because then all of a sudden we know where we have to look in that particular patient. It lets us focus in from the thousands of measurements down to one smaller set or one location in the system. So there's a lot of positive hope already in this, and I think
what
we
it
can bring
does
that to bear.
for the patients is tremendous, right? Because you're much more willing to deal with uncertainty in this case. I know that's not true in many cases, but we have so much uncertainty already that to have the clinician saying, we found something, we have no idea what it means, but we're going to pursue it, great. At least we're on the same page around that there's something to look for, there is something there, I think, because you get the sense as a patient, is this really real? I mean, here I am with all this education, and I know on one hand, yes, this must be really real. It's profoundly changed my life, and yet I'm doubting myself all the time around, well, maybe it's me, maybe it's something that I could do differently, or I'm not doing enough of this, or I need to do more of this, and that kind of nonsense in your head as a patient, it's the last thing you need.
so we're getting near out of time. I wonder, can you give us a brief update on Alex?
Yeah, so Alex was going to join us on Skype with his mom, Caroline. Unfortunately, he had a really, really difficult night with his breathing, and he's not able to join us. He probably is driving to the hospital right now, and that's the life of an undiagnosed child, right? I mean, he has a little better day. He currently doesn't have the ability to communicate much, but he does go to school when he's feeling well, and when he's not feeling well, the teacher comes to the house, so he's still in his grade, and he has friends, and they come over and they speak with him and all that, and it's probably, watching families with undiagnosed children, one of the most devastating things. I've worked with people with very, very difficult conditions to treat in my day job, but I have to say that undiagnosed parents and undiagnosed families are in tremendous distress, and to look at your child suffering, and in this case, really dying in front of your eyes, and not knowing what's killing your child, and not knowing, what to do next, and not even having a cold case file. And I think that what this group has created that is so beautiful is that now we all have a cold case file. One of my biggest fears was like, we're all going to suffer in vain. We're not going to have information. There's nowhere to put our information once we're no longer here. And everybody wasted such important data. And now with all this data that we collected, I think there is a sense for all the patients of a relief that, wait, okay, maybe not for us, but the next generation can benefit from this. And I think that all of us share this feeling that is immortalized in these genetic studies and the other studies that we've done. So I need to thank all of you for the support to what we're doing in the movement. You guys are fantastic people, and Larry.
So I think even though this seems very depressing in some sense, and I feel certainly, and if you deal with any of these people, a sense of personal urgency to get on with things that aren't normal and see if we can't break through into this new world. Actually, there's a lot of optimism here, because with Andy now and OMI, compared to where we were last year at FiRe, where we had data we couldn't know what to do with, there's now a repository for that data, a set of integrative tools to go after that data. That itself can be made available to attract more researchers from all over the world who want to do this but don't have a place to go to do the data. And then with Mike, the integration isn't just this, and I say this is a scientist, just scientific, but the whole person is actually now and possibly to be looked at. And in fact, Alex lives in San Diego, and Mike has said that he's going to volunteer to look at him and lay hands on him and bring that larger integrative view of a human to it. And so again, I just think this is a perfect example of what Mark said in the opening night of what FiRe has become in 15 years. The ability to actually go beyond talks to actually changing the world. Thanks.
Thank you.